PLC. Majid Dahiru, newspaper columnist, security expert and policy analyst, completes our number. A round of applause to Majid as he makes his way to the podium.
That communication dates back to when it was born. Efforts have been made repeatedly to ban or restrict the operations of dark communications. Apart from harassing me regularly to comment on national issues, just like Michael said, comment, without any payment, on some occasions that the AIT has been alleged to have crossed or to have committed some offenses, we have also been challenged to intervene. Unlike now, that the NBC suspends and imposes fines on media houses at will. There was an occasion that the AIT was alleged, I think through Mike Aruleba, to have embarrassed the president of the nation by reporting that our president was riding a second-hand plane that was said to be a seditious act for which the reporter and some other journalists were arrested. I think they got their news from AIT. They were arrested and charged before the court. That was in 2001 under President Obasanjo. But we only filed an objection, Mike, as you will recall, that the provisions of the criminal code on sedition have been declared illegal and unconstitutional as far back as 1983. But our government still decided to lift that provision of the law from the grave to harass the organization. But these days, I understand you pay fines regularly, and I do hope that one of these days you will instruct my colleague in Abuja here, Chief Michael Zekrame, to challenge the legality of imposing fines on people, organizations without going to court. Having said that, let me say I'm delighted to be in your midst today to contribute to this great debate. I actually tried to decline the invitation because I didn't think I could satisfy this distinguished audience because I'm really not an ethnic champion. I prefer to look at the crisis confronting our country from a class perspective. So I'm sure you are going to understand where I'm coming from if I fail to satisfy your expectation. Let me start by thanking Dark Communications PLC, owners of the iconic Ray Power Radio Network and the Pan-Africanist African Independent Television, AIT, for ever deepening discourse continentally with emphasis on Nigeria. I feel honored to have been invited to deliver the keynote address at these 4th DAS Awards. The theme I've been asked to speak on, ethnic nationalities and the emerging challenges managing Project Nigeria, speaks to the very challenge of Nigeria as a country. Ethnicity and the human being. All humans are born into one society or another. The basic instinct of the human being is preservation. It begins by identifying with his immediate environment and the people around him, especially his parents or guardians, and expands from there to his community and ethnic group, to wider groups onto his race. The nuclear family into which a human being is born belongs to a social group which has a distinct culture, language, a usually contiguous geography and religion. This is called ethnicity. It is an identity we do not choose on our own. We are simply born into it. It is not a matter in which we have a choice. So while a human being can change his name, school, job, if he has one, spouse, political party, ideology, religion, and even country, he cannot change his ethnicity. It is therefore one of the most ridiculous things to hold a person accountable for his ethnicity, a matter in which he has no choice. Given this reality, there may be no basis for discrimination, subordination, clampdown, or massacre of people based on their ethnic origins. Ethnic groups alone, but usually in concert with other established societies, nations or states. Sometimes, as in the case of colonialism or conquest, this is imposed. But no matter how ethnic groups become part of the same country, for there to be peace, harmony, and development, there must be equitable and just social relations. That's my first solution. This is why it is important to run inclusive governments in states and countries. Many countries have majority and minority ethnic groups, but it's how they are managed and treated that will determine the well-being of such a country or political stability in such a country. Even if a country is monolithic, there may still be differences which only continuous, just social relations can cure. Somalia, for instance, has a core ethnic group that makes up over 90% of the population and one single religion. Yet, the core Somali clans have had unresolved differences for ages. So, Somalia, since the overthrow of Mohamed Siabari in January 1991, has been virtually at war. That is 30 years now. And there is no end in sight. It means a country having a single ethnic group and religion is no guarantee for peace. And I think this is very important for Nigerians to understand. Ethnic politics in Nigeria. What is today Nigeria? It's an amalgam of multi-ethnic and some say multi-religious, multi-ethnic nationalities, which for hundreds of thousands of years before colonialism had coexisted. We talk of the transatlantic trade and the rest of that. So it was not in 1914 that our people came together for the first time, contrary to misleading theories by bourgeois historians. At the back of nationalism in Nigeria, ethnicity did not play a major factor as it has come to play today. The major nationalist movement, and this is important for all of us, the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, NCNC, was a creation of pan-national groups like the trade unions, student movement, and pan-Africanists like Herbert Macaulay, Nnamdi Azikiwe. In fact, Azikiwe came from the United States and having collaborated with the Nkrumah, Du Bois, and the rest of them. He was born with of Pan-Africanism. When Macaulay, who was from Western Nigeria, died, all rallied behind the Secretary General, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was from the East. So strong was the non-ethnic origins and base of the NC that in the West, in Western Nigeria, from colonial times until the 1979 elections, the dominant Yoruba party in the region, the Action Group, did not win elections in the major cities like Abeokuta, Ibadan, and Ife. The NCNC always swept the elections in the main urban centers, even though the NCNC later became a regional party in the East. It competed with the AG in the West and MPC in the North in terms of development, unlike now. And it's very sad that up till now, we still refer to the development of our country up to the First Republic. The colonialists did not hide their dubious agenda to hand over the control of our country to the nationalist class, nationalist group, for easy manipulation of the country. Those who fought for independence of Nigeria, and I can say this without any fear of contradiction, are not the Amonubelos, the Awolowos, the Azikiwe. No! Those who fought for the independence of Nigeria are young people, activists, and I refer in particular to the Zikis movement. These were young people, Amdala, Enahoro, Mogo-Okoye, Aguna, and others, who motivated by the ideal of Pan-Africanism espoused by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, decided to come together and demanded for the socialist reconstruction of Nigeria from colonial rule. In 1945, that group organized election like we are having today, where it demanded for a call for revolution. Because of that lecture, the members of the group were rounded up by the colonial regime and jailed for sedition. Because according to the British colonial regime, these guys were trying to chase us out of Nigeria. Of course, you also had the workers' strike of 1945, led by Labour leader number 1, Imodu. You also had other activists like Fela's mother, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, Sawaba, Gambo, and others, and Margaret Echo, who, following the 1929 massacre of 55 women by the British colonial regime in Aba, for fighting against double taxation. You can't tax my husband and tax me. That was what the women were fighting about. In 1929, 55 were killed. In 1949, 21 coal miners were killed in Enugu. You don't read about this in your history books. But Nigerian women mobilized, decided to lead, to join the struggle, to be in the front of the struggle for independence. It was because of the fact that the workers, the student movement, and the women of our country were mobilizing against colonial rule, that the British colonial regime decided to co-opt the nationalist politicians into this business of handing over Nigeria. Because it was clear that while the British government did not move fast, colonialism would be defeated on the terms dictated by Nigerians. But what happened was that independence was given to us, according to many historians, on a platter of gold. That is dubious. People were killed, there were wars, there were fought, all over the country. All over the country, in the north, in the east, in the west. Some of our traditional rulers, particularly Jajao Bokobo, was deposed and deported to the Caribbean for challenging the control of coastal trade by the British. Of course, you are aware that Overani of Benin was also deposed and deported. So, our people went through a hell. So please, we have to rewrite the history of our country and not all this thing about, the British government was very generous, they gave independence to us. No, we fought for independence. Another one that I need to correct for us in law and political science, you are told that the Bill of Rights was given to us in order to allay the fears of the minority. Bullshit, it's not true. In Ghana that got independence before Nigeria, there was a chapter on Bill of Rights. India had a chapter on Bill of Rights. What the British did is to say, we need to include a chapter on human rights in the constitution we are giving to this people. Otherwise, our interests won't be nationalized. It's also about Nigeria. 2, we may be challenged for committing crimes against humanity under colonial rule. That was the basis. Not for us to allay the fears of, if they wanted to allay the fears of the minorities, why did they not create regions for them? Now, the political class did not manage independence well. So by 1965, the old system virtually grounded to a halt, which led to the coup of 1966, led by Major Nzeogo, Kaduna Nzeogo. At first, it wasn't seen as an ethnic thing. But later, having regards to the fact that the killing did not reflect federal character, which apparently was not intended, but that was the offense. So you had a counter coup in July 1966, which tried to, kill more people. This time around, military officers were killed who could stand on the way. And of course, for several years, the military destroyed whatever was left of the unity of Nigeria. By 1993, our country had the best election, in which, for the first time, you had a Muslim ticket that won the election. In fact, the NRC ticket was a Muslim-Christian ticket, but that didn't bother people. It was an election in which the presidential candidate of the NRC was defeated by the presidential candidate of the SDP. In his own word, in Kano, an Abeokuta man. But what happened? Instead of building on such pan-Nigerian mandate, the Babangida junta, one of the greatest offenses committed against Nigeria, annulled the election in an attempt to transmute, to metamorphose from a military dictator to a civilian president. That was the whole basis. Now, today, we haven't come out of that crisis. But what has happened? Distinguished audience, what has happened? the situation today. You have a situation today where a government in power deliberately promotes the disunity of our country. Through lopsided appointments, and selective prosecution of corrupt people. Selective. We have a situation where the chief law officer of the country will sign an agreement with somebody who is alleged to have stolen billions, and then thou shalt go and say no more, and the cases pending in court are withdrawn, while others, like Chief Raymond Dokwesi, are made to go through the entire gamut, like a criminal system. You can't run a country where you have selective application of the law. It's not possible. No. And some of the statements oozing out of power of the villa promotes disunity. When you say, oh, farmers were killing Borno or Maiduguri, Borno State. Oh, the farmer did not tell the soldier before going to their farm, I beg your pardon, from the seat of power, instead of sympathizing with those who have loved their loved ones. Young people were demonstrating against police brutality. You kill them, not just in Lagos. In Ogbomoso, 4 were killed. In Benin, over 25 were killed. In Port Harcourt, scores were killed. Abuja here, you saw thugs in broad daylight in a city where you have all the embassies. Thugs were being ferreted, carried all over the place, and they were shooting at protesters. Thugs were unleashed on unarmed protesters. At the end of the day now, in a place like Lagos, the pathologists of the government went to a panel and said 99 dead bodies were dumped in the morgue. 3 of them traced to Lekki. And Lagos State government has come out with a white paper. Nobody died. Nobody died. In Zaria, in December 2015, under a democratic government, and it has never happened in any African country. Not even in Rwanda, during the genocide, were hundreds killed and buried in a mass grave. And people in Lagos, a minister of information and culture, against the culture of Africa, came out to say, where are the relations of all of those who died? Why have they not come out? And I asked him, Honorable Minister, where are the relations of the people killing Zaria? Even your own commission of inquiry, we never knew. The Judicial Commission of Inquiry set up by the government said 348 people were killed and buried quietly, secretly. And we're in a democracy. You may not like the sheriffs, you may not like the young people, but they deserve to live. And so don't follow the government. Don't engage in this fixation. It's not about Lekki alone. They're only talking about Lekki. What of the other 96 people who were killed? Are they not human beings? And I have said it publicly in Nigeria. It is always difficult because majority of the people involved are illiterates. So you don't want to come out and say, I lost my loved one, because you may be arrested by the government for giving birth to a young man that staged a protest. That's it. So nobody comes out, and the government, they are not denying that people have died. But we are simply saying it is not our business. Now, I've gone to specifics on some of the statements made by the government, which have continued to incite our people against the unity of the country. As far as members of the ruling class are concerned, the issue of the unity of Nigeria is a foregone conclusion for them. Hence, two of the country's former rulers, and both of them spent up to 20 years in power, General Olusegun Obasanjo and General Ibrahim Babangida, issued a joint press statement in July 2012, wherein they maintained rather arrogantly, and I quote them, "The unity of Nigeria is not negotiable." End of quote. In his own defense of the unity of Nigeria, President Buhari has pointedly accused the proponents of restructuring or power devolution of trying to break up the country. Even though it's in the manifesto of the party, of the APC. But the president says anybody who talks about restructuring is trying to break up the country. Having taken part in the Civil War, this retired general claimed to have resolved on their own to keep Nigeria one, united. But there is no basis whatsoever for the grandstanding of our retired military officers as they have disingenuously relied on Section 2(1) of the 1999 Constitution, which states, and I quote, "Nigeria is one indivisible and indissoluble sovereign state to be known as the Federal Republic of Nigeria." End of quote. But the military officers ensured in 1979 and 1999 that what they handed over to Nigeria or Nigerians is a unitary system of government, not a Federal Republic of Nigeria. The indictment of political leaders in cases of ethno-religious violence in the country demonstrates a particular dangerous feature of the connection between religion and politics in the Nigerian contextual environment. For instance, in its report regarding the Matasine riot, the Justice and the Agoli Tribunal found, and I quote, "There are various levels of involvement, ranging from Matasine himself and his followers to the state government and its agencies, individuals, organizations, the police, and the National Security Organization." End of quote. A leader of the Boko Haram sect was a commissioner in the Borno state government. I'm talking of Sheriff's government in Borno state. In 2003, he sat down with the Boko Haram leaders. "Will you please vote for me? I want you to work for my election." He said, "Yes, on one condition. You will make one of us the commissioner for religious affairs in your government." And he agreed. And he did. But what happened? In order to cover up the involvement of the government in how terrorism emerged in the country, the commissioner, the leader of the Boko Haram sect, Yusuf, and his father-in-law were killed, exterminated in detention. And that was when that sect pronounced fatwa on the Nigerian state. Now, the point I'm making is that the members of the ruling class, whether in Jos, in Kano, or no, wherever, are involved in using religion and ethnicity to cause disunity in our country. And they come out arrogantly. The unity of Nigeria is not negotiable. The unity that you are subverting on a daily basis. As I've shown elsewhere, ethnicity is given. It is only that in Nigeria, people, especially the elite class, manipulate it for selfish reasons and have so far abused it that all ethnic groups feel vulnerable and marginalized, if not endangered. All ethnic groups now. Yet, Ethnicity does not define the person or character, does not confer either wisdom or foolishness, morality or immorality, intelligence or stupidity, wickedness or righteousness. Where in forward-looking country, there are policies and programs to empower the weak and the marginalized. In Nigeria, the strong and powerful majority seek to take advantage over the rest of the society. Minority groups take advantage of minority groups. In the United States, the bastion of federalism and the bastion of capitalism, the program is called affirmative action to assist the poor, the weak. In Nigeria, it is known as the federal character principle. It is entrenched in section 14 of the Constitution that the government of Nigeria shall be constituted in such a way to give a sense of belonging to every part of the country. But is that what we have today? Others include, listen, catchment area, quota system, and so on and so forth, which are employed more often to further divide the country. For me, there are two ethnic groups in Nigeria, two major ethnic groups. Listen to me. Ours is a nation, sharply divided between the rich and the poor. Ours is a country of two nations, the nation of the haves and the nation of the have-nots. Ours is a society of a minority of exploiters and a majority of exploited people. Even though the Constitution stipulates that citizens shall have equal rights and opportunities, such equality does not exist in practice. Hence, the fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution are enjoyed exclusively by the rich who have the financial means to challenge the violations of their rights. When you violate the rights of a poor man or a poor woman, it will tell you, God will judge. But the poor man says, call me my lawyer, and he will brief his lawyer to go to court. Every Nigerian has freedom of movement, but the passport is sold officially for 50, I think about 30,000 now. How does a person who lives on less than 350 naira acquire a passport? So when people talk about ethnic groups, we conveniently, the elite conveniently forget the poor in their own ethnic group. But how many citizens have the means to buy land? Because the conscience says you can acquire land anywhere in Nigeria and settle there. But how many Nigerians have the money to pay for land and acquire certificate of occupancy from the government? For them, for the poor, the unity of Nigeria means the fundamental right to live in dignity, which can only be actualized through the equitable redistribution of the abundant wealth and resources of our country. On the other hand, the unity of Nigeria is non-negotiable for members of the ruling class because they are profiting from the injustice and oppression on which the unity is built. Regardless of ethnicity and religion, the rich are united in the boardrooms of private and public companies. They don't fight when they want to steal or to loot the treasury. They don't fight. They meet in clubs at home and abroad. The rich live in mansions in estates and in posh areas in urban centers. They shop in malls and supermarkets at home and abroad. Whenever they are indisposed, they are treated in private hospitals at home and abroad. In the states where workers are owed arrears of salaries for several months, former public officers owe pension. Governors and legislators are paid their double emolument as and when due. You have never heard that a governor was not paid his salary. No, not in Nigeria. And there is no fight in the National Assembly. when you are talking about padding the budgets or paying unapproved salaries and allowances to members, there's no fine. Unlike in the Second Republic, you could predict where the UPN and PRP legislators, what they will vote for. Why the NPN, NPP, you could predict where either will vote. These days, there is no problem in the National Assembly. All the members, regardless of political parties, vote one way or the other. Now, restructuring. How people are talking of restructuring. They are talking of restructuring without economic power. And I want to say, all parts of Nigeria, contrary to what you are told, all parts of Nigeria are part of the struggle for restructuring. And I will show that in a moment. In a recent lecture, I observed that, let me just say this, between 1999 and now, and Chief of the Government can bear me out, not less than 10 cases filed by the 36 state government, not southern states, 36 state government, have the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal and the High Court, Federal Court, have taken some powers hitherto exercised by the federal government. Powers that were hijacked under the military. The courts are giving those powers to state government, and all the 36 state government are benefiting maximally from the result of those cases. One, local governments have now been recognized by the Supreme Court to be the affairs of state government. Thou shalt not seize the fund of local government, statutory allocation. You know that in the case of Lagos. Thou shalt not get involved in the election of local governments. Thou shalt not monitor the funds of local government. These are all cases decided against the federal government. Furthermore, for the coastal states, Lagos went to court. I can't be going to Abuja if we want to, have our boats in our waterways. And the Court of Appeal said, yes, inland waterways shall be controlled by state government. It is when the waters are intra that you can talk about the federal government. The federal government was collecting entertainment fees. The Supreme Court said, no, that is not in the explicit list. Only state government can collect entertainment levies. So, hospitality levies, hotels and the rest of it. Federal government was collecting. Federal government was managing physical planning. If you wanted to build a house, you had to go to the federal secretariat in your state for approved plan. The Supreme Court said no. Physical planning is the business of the state. Land, the Supreme Court held that it is the governor of every state that shall be in charge and manage land. So if President Buhari has said it publicly, if President Buhari wants, or if the federal government wants to have a project in Sokoto or Borno or Delta, the federal government will have to apply to the state government. And that is the country today. Every state has benefited from the devolution of power. So let nobody deceive you that this struggle for restructuring, or let nobody claim that the struggle for restructuring is being only a part of the country is campaigning for it. All parts of the country are benefiting. And I can refer to other cases. Without these cases, I submit, many of the state governments will have collapsed economically. And the last one is the one of VAT. The federal government has just discovered that no amount of legal sophistry can make it win that case. So they are now thinking of, can we negotiate? So, and that is our country for you. So the point I'm making therefore is that restructuring through litigation is already part of the gains of the democratic struggle. But let me now one. All these powers that have been taken from Abuja, all of them have been cornered by state governors. Today, in every state, all the seats, local government seats, chairmanship position, all the councillors, all the seats are won by the ruling party, regardless of the political party. So, the point I'm making therefore is that, yes, but I'm saying that this business of destruction has left out the economy. Has left out the economy. And I'll give you two instances. The NNPC and the LNG were built with money from the federation account. This is very important. Not money from the federal government account, from the federation account. But today, it is the president alone that gives oil blocks that are part of the mineral resources of our country, taken over from the owners and vested in the federation. NNPC has been unbundled. Today, all the board members are appointed by all the companies that are set up are companies of the federal government, whereas they should be companies of the federation, of the federal government, states, and local government. Richard, let me just try and conclude. Two issues are very important, I beg you. The question of official impunity. Official impunity, that nobody can challenge the federal government for breaching the constitution, for disobeying court order. I'll just give two instances. The fight on terror. The Attorney General announced in April this year that 400 sponsors of terrorism have been arrested and detained. And we're going to give you their names very soon. When the gentleman was asked recently in the United States, I think September this year, why have you not released the name? He said, that will undermine investigation. But that same regime gives us the names of so-called looters in the PDP. For the poor, they are paraded every day by the police. But when it comes to sponsors of terrorism, we are told that their name, the disclosure of their name will cause problem. Secondly, 3 policemen went to arrest Wadume, a criminal suspect, powerful criminal suspect. 10 soldiers chased the police and killed them. They were charged before the federal court here. The Attorney General would do the cases against the soldiers. So they're working free. And you want to fight terrorism. It was easy to ban IPOB and the Islamic movement in Nigeria. But to ban the so-called terrorists, it's been very difficult for the federal government. On the management of NDDC, this is very important. The NDDC under the law shall be managed by a board representing the 9 oil-producing states. Since 2019, for the past 3 years, President Buhari has put the law aside. He started by constituting an interim management committee. And when the government was challenged, we were told, please, an auditor was looking into the records of the company, the organization. Once the auditing is concluded, we shall have a board. The auditing has been completed. What do you have now? A sole administrator, unknown to law. But that is not all. In a very lopsided arrangement, today, the Minister of Niger Delta, the sole administrator, of NDDC and the special advisor to the president on Niger Delta are all from Akwa Ibom State. It is the same thing with National Human Rights Commission, which are our area. They have a 60-member board council. 4 are from Northwest. Nobody from Northeast, where the greatest number of human rights violations take place. So the point I'm making, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is that the government itself promotes disunity in our country, and if we want to fight for unity, we must factor in, we must take cognizance of the role of members of the ruling class. They don't believe in Nigeria, they only deceive Nigeria. Conclusion. Worried about the rising wave of poverty in the land, a legislator, Honorable Sergius Ogun, recently sponsored a bill to make Chapter of the constitutional system. It was defeated. The bill was defeated. The honorable member said, if we have this bill, you are going to cause governors in the state to have sleepless nights. Where would they get the money? It is my submission that by rejecting the bill, the members of the House of Representatives have only postponed the evil day, because poverty has become completely intolerable in our country. Permit me, in conclusion, to remind the members of the legislature, the executive, and even the judiciary of the cautionary words of former American President J.F. Kennedy, and I quote him: if a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich.
Thanks for checking out SYMFONI on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe and like our video.